The boy told them about his life as a shepherd and was about to tell them about his experiences at the crystal shop when the Englishman came into the tent. "I've been looking for you all morning," he said, as he led the boy outside. "I need you to help me find out where the alchemist lives." First, they tried to find him on their own. An alchemist would probably live in a manner that was different from that of the rest of the people at the oasis, and it was likely that in his tent was an oven continuously burning. They searched everywhere, and found that the oasis was much larger than they could have imagined. There were hundreds of tents. "We've wasted almost the entire day," said the Englishman, sitting down with the boy near one of the wells. "Maybe we'd better ask someone," the boy suggested. The Englishman didn't want to tell others about his reasons for being at the oasis, and couldn't make up his mind. But, finally, he agreed that the boy, who spoke better Arabic than he, should do so. The boy approached a woman who had come to the well to fill a goat's skin with water. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm trying to find out where the alchemist lives here at the oasis." The woman said she had never heard of such a person, and hurried away. But, before she fled, she advised the boy that he had better not try to converse with women who were dressed in black, because they were married women. He should respect tradition. The Englishman was disappointed. It had seemed that he had made the journey for nothing. The boy was also saddened. His friend was in pursuit of his personal legend, and when someone was in pursuit, the entire universe made an effort to help him succeed. That's what the old king had said. He couldn't have been wrong. "I've never heard of alchemists before," the boy said. "Maybe no one here has either." The Englishman's eyes lit up. "That's it! Maybe no one here knows what an alchemist is. Find out who it is who cures people's illnesses." Several women dressed in black came to the well for water, but the boy would speak to none of them, despite the Englishman's insistence. Then a man approached. "Do you know someone here who cures people's illnesses?" the boy asked. "Allah cures our illnesses," said the man, clearly frightened of the strangers. "You're looking for witch doctors." He spoke some verses from the Quran, and moved on. Another man appeared. He was older, and was carrying a small bucket. The boy repeated his question. "Why do you want to find that sort of person?" the Arab asked. "Because my friend here has traveled for many months in order to meet with him," the boy said. "If there is such a man here at the oasis, he must be the very powerful one," said the old man, after thinking for a few moments. "Not even the tribal chieftains are able to see them when they want to, only when he consents. Wait for the end of the war, then leave with the caravan. Don't try to enter into the life of the oasis," he said, and walked away. But the Englishman was exultant that we're on the right track. Finally, a young woman who approached, who was not dressed in black. She had a veil on her shoulder, and her head was covered by a veil, but her face was uncovered. The boy approached her to ask about the alchemist. At that moment, it seemed to him that time stood still, and the soul of the world surged within him. When he looked into her dark eyes, and saw that her lips were poised between a laugh and silence, he learned the most important part of the language that all the world spoke. The language that everyone on earth was capable of understanding in their heart. It was love. Something older than humanity, more ancient than the desert. Something that exerted the same force whenever two pairs of eyes met, as theirs had, here, at the well. She smiled, and that was certainly an omen. The omen he had been awaiting, without even knowing he was, for all his life. The omen he had sought to find with his sheep and his books, and in the crystals and in the silence of the desert. It was the pure language of the world. It required no explanation, just as the universe needs none as it travels through endless time. What the boy felt at that moment was that he was in the presence of the only woman in his life, and that, with no need for words, she had recognized the same thing. He was more certain of it than anything in the world. He had been told by his parents and his grandparents that he must fall in love and really know a person before becoming committed. But maybe people who felt that way never learned the universal language. Because when you know that language, it's easy to understand that someone in the world awaits you, whether it's in the middle of the desert or in some great city. And when such two people encounter each other and their eyes meet, the past and the future become unimportant, and the incredible certainty that everything under the sun has been written by one hand only. It is the hand that evokes love and creates a twin soul for every person in the world. Without such love, one's dreams would have no meaning. Maktub, thought the boy. The Englishman shook the boy. Come on, ask her. The boy stepped closer to the girl, and when she smiled, he did the same. What's your name? He asked. Fatima, the girl said, averting her eyes. That's what some women in my country are called. It's the name of the prophet's daughter, Fatima said. The invaders carried the name everywhere. The beautiful girl spoke of the invaders with pride. The Englishman prodded him, and the boy asked her about the man who cured people's illnesses. That's the man who knows all secrets of the world, she said. He communicates with the genies of the desert. The genies were spirits of good and evil, and the girl pointed to the south, indicating that it was there the strange man lived. Then she filled her vessel with water and left. The Englishman vanished, too, gone to find the alchemist, and the boy sat there by the well for a very long time, remembering that one day in Tarifa, the Levanter had brought him the perfume of that woman, and realizing that he had loved her before he even knew she existed. He knew that his love for her would enable him to discover every treasure in the world. The next day, the boy returned to the well, hoping to see the girl. To his surprise, the Englishman was there, looking out at the desert. I waited all afternoon and evening, he said. He appeared with the first stars of the evening. I told him what I was seeking, and he asked me if I had ever transformed lead into gold. I told him that was what I had come here to learn. He told me I should try to do so, and so he said, "Go and try." The boy didn't say anything. The poor Englishman had traveled all this way, only to be told he should repeat what he had already done so, many times. "So, then try," he said to the Englishman. "That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start now." As the Englishman left, Fatima arrived and filled her vessel with water. "I came to tell you just one thing," the boy said. "I want you to be my wife. I love you." The girl dropped the container, and the water spilled. "I'm going to wait here for you every day. I've crossed the desert in search of treasure that is somewhere near the pyramids, and for me, the war seemed a curse, but now it's a blessing, because it brought me to you." "The tribesmen are always in search of treasure," the girl said, as if she had guessed what he was thinking, "and the women of the desert are proud of their tribesmen." She refilled her vessel and left. The boy went to the well every day to meet with Fatima. He told her about his life as a shepherd, about the king, and about the crystal shop. They became friends, and except for the 15 minutes he spent with her, each day seemed that it would never end. When he had been at the oasis for almost a month, the leader of the caravan called a meeting of all the people traveling with him. "We don't know when the war will end, so we can't continue our journey," he said. "The battles may last for a long time, perhaps even years. There are powerful forces on each side, and the war is important to both armies. It's not a battle of good against evil. It's a war between forces that are fighting for the balance of power, and when that type of battle begins, it lasts longer than others, because Allah is on both sides." The people went back to where they were living, and the boy went to meet Fatima that afternoon. He told her about the morning's meeting. "The day after we met," Fatima said, "you told me that you loved me. Then, you taught me something of the universal language and the soul of the world. Because of that, I've become a part of you." The boy listened to the sound of her voice and thought it to be more beautiful than the sound of the wind in the date palms. "I've been waiting for you here at this oasis for a long time. I've forgotten about my past, about my traditions, and the way in which men of the desert expect women to behave. Ever since I was a child, I have dreamed that the desert would bring me a wonderful present. Now, my present has arrived, and it's you." The boy wanted to take her hand, but Fatima's hands held to the handles of her jug. "You've told me about your dreams, about the old king and your treasure, and you've told me about omens. So now, I fear nothing, because it was those omens that brought you to me. And I am a part of your dream, a part of your personal legend, as you call it. That's why I want you to continue toward your goal. If you have to wait until the war is over, then wait. But if you have to go before then, go in the pursuit of your dreams. The dunes are changed by the wind, but the desert never changes. That's the way it will be with our love for each other." "Maktub," she said, "if I really am a part of your dream, you'll come back one day." The boy was sad as he left her that day. He thought of all the married shepherds he had known. They had a difficult time convincing their wives that they had to go off into distant fields. Love required them to stay with the people they loved. He told Fatima that at their next meeting. "The desert takes our men away from us, and they don't always return," she said. "We know that, and we are used to it. Those who don't return become part of the clouds, a part of the animals that hide in the ravines, and of the water that comes from the earth. They become a part of everything. They become the soul of the world. Some do come back, and then the other women are happy because they believe that their men will one day return as well. I used to look at those women and envy them and their happiness. Now, I too will be one of the women who wait. I'm a desert woman, and I'm proud of that. I want my husband to wander as free as the wind that shapes the dunes, and, if I have to, I will accept the fact that he has become part of the clouds and the animals in the water of the desert." The boy went to look for the Englishman. He wanted to tell him about Fatima. He was surprised when he saw that the Englishman had built a furnace himself outside of his tent. It was a strange furnace, fueled by firewood, with a transparent flask heating on top. As the Englishman stared out at the desert, his eyes seemed brighter than they had when he was reading his books. "This is the first phase of the job," he said. "I have to separate out the sulfur. To do that successfully, I must have no fear of failure. It was my fear of failure that kept me from attempting the masterwork. Now, I'm beginning what I could have started 10 years ago, but I'm happy at least that I didn't wait 20 years. He continued to feed the fire, and the boy stayed on until the desert turned pink in the setting sun. He felt the urge to go out into the desert, to see if the silence held its answers. To see if its silence held the answers to his questions. He wandered for a while, keeping the date palms of the oasis within sight. He listened to the wind, and felt the stones beneath his feet. Here and there, he found a shell, and realized that the desert, in remote times, had been a sea. He sat on a stone and allowed himself to become hypnotized by the horizon. He tried to deal with the concept of love as distinct from possession, and couldn't separate them. But Fatima was a woman of the desert, and, if anything could help him understand, it was the desert. As he sat there thinking, he sensed movement above him. Looking up, he saw a pair of hawks flying high in the sky. He watched the hawks as they drifted on the wind. Although their flight appeared to have no pattern, it made a certain kind of sense to the boy. It was just that he couldn't grasp what it meant. He followed the movement of the birds, trying to read something into it. Maybe these desert birds could explain to him the meaning of love without ownership. He felt sleepy. In his heart, he wanted to remain awake, but he also wanted to sleep. I am learning the language of the world, and everything in the world is beginning to make sense to me, even the flight of the hawks, he said to himself. And in that mood, he was grateful to be in love. When you are in love, things make even more sense, he thought. Suddenly, one of the hawks made a flashing dive through the sky, attacking the other. As it did so, a sudden fleeting image came to the boy. An army, with its swords at the ready, riding into the oasis. The vision vanished immediately, but it had shaken him. He had heard people speak of mirages, and had already seen him himself. They were desires that, because of their intensity, materialized over the sands of the desert. But he certainly didn't desire that an army invade the oasis. He wanted to forget about the vision and return to his meditation. He tried again to concentrate on the pink shades of the desert and its stones, but there was something in his heart that wouldn't allow him to do so. Always heed the omens, the old king had said. The boy recalled what he had seen in the vision and sensed that it was actually going to happen. He rose and made his way back toward the palm trees. Once again, he perceived the many languages in the things about him. This time, the desert was safe, and it was that the oasis had become dangerous. The camel driver was seated at the base of a palm tree, observing the sunset. He saw the boy appear from the other side of the dunes. "An army is coming," the boy said. "I had a vision." "The desert fills men's hearts with visions," the camel driver answered. But the boy told him about the hawks, that he had been watching their flight and suddenly felt himself to have plunged into the soul of the world. The camel driver understood what the boy was saying. He knew that any given thing on the earth could reveal the history of all things. One could open a book to any page, or look at a person's hand, or turn a card, or watch the flight of the birds. Whatever thing observed, one could find a connection with his experience of the moment. Actually, it wasn't that those things in themselves revealed anything at all. It was just that people, looking at what was occurring around them, could find a means of penetration to the soul of the world. The desert was full of men who earned their living based on the ease with which they could penetrate to the soul of the world. They were known as seers, and were held in fear by women and the elderly. Tribesmen were also very wary of consulting them, because it would be impossible to be effective in battle if one knew that he was fated to die. The tribesmen preferred the taste of battle, and the thrill of not knowing what the outcome would be. The future was already written by Allah, and what he had written was always for the good of man. So the tribesmen lived only for the present, because the present was full of surprises, and they had to be aware of many things. Where was the enemy's sword? Where was his horse? What kind of blow should he deliver next in order to remain alive? The camel driver was not a fighter, and he had consulted with seers. Many of them had been right about what they said, while some of them had been wrong. Then, one day, the oldest seer he had ever sought out, and the one most to be feared, had asked why the camel driver was so interested in the future. "Well, so I can do things," he had responded, "and so I can change those things that I don't want to happen. But then they wouldn't be a part of your future," the seer had said. "Well, maybe I just want to know the future so I can prepare myself for what's coming. If good things are coming, they will be a pleasant surprise," said the seer. "If bad things are, you'll know in advance. You will suffer greatly before they even occur." "I want to know about the future because I'm a man," the camel driver had said to the seer, "and men always live their lives based on the future." The seer was a specialist in the casting of twigs. He threw them on the ground and made interpretations based on how they fell. That day, he didn't make a cast. He wrapped the twigs in a piece of cloth and put them in his bag. I make my living forecasting the future for people, he said. I know the science of the twigs, and I know how to use them to penetrate to the place where all is written. There, I can read the past, and discover what has already been forgotten, and understand the omens that are here in the present. When people consult me, it's not that I'm reading the future. I am guessing at the future. The future belongs to God. I am guessing at the future. The future belongs to God, and is only He who reveals it under extraordinary circumstances. How do I guess at the future? Based on the omens of the present. The secret is here in the present. If you pay attention to the present, you can improve upon it. And if you improve on the present, what comes later will also be better. Forget about the future, and live each day according to the teachings, confident that God loves His children. Each day, in itself, brings with it an eternity. The camel driver asked what the circumstances were under which God would allow him to see the future. Only when He Himself reveals it, and God only rarely reveals the future. When He does so, it is for one reason. It's a future that was written so as to be altered. God had shown the boy a part of the future, the camel driver thought. Why was it that He wanted the boy to serve as His instrument? Go and speak to the tribal chieftains, said the camel driver. Tell them about the armies that are approaching. They'll laugh at me, the boy said. They are men of the desert, and men of the desert are used to dealing with omens. Well then, they probably already know. They're not concerned with that right now. They believe that if they have to know about something that Allah wants them to know, someone will tell them about it. It has happened many times before, but this time, the person is you. The boy thought of Fatima, and he decided he would go see the chiefs of the tribe. The boy approached the guard at the front of the huge white tent at the center of the oasis. I want to see the chieftains. I've brought omens from the desert. Without responding, the guard entered the tent, where he remained for some time. When he emerged, it was with a young Arab, dressed in white and gold. The boy told the younger man what he had seen, and the man asked him to wait here. He disappeared into the tent. Night fell, and an assortment of fighting men and merchants entered and exited the tent. One by one, the campfires were extinguished, and the oasis fell as quiet as the desert. Only the lights of the great tent remained. During all this time, the boy thought about Fatima, and that he was still unable to understand his last conversation with her. Finally, after hours of waiting, the guard bade the boy enter. The boy was astonished by what he saw inside. Never could he have imagined that, there in the middle of the desert, there existed a tent like this one. The ground was covered with the most beautiful carpets he had ever walked upon, and from the top of the structure hung lamps of hand-wrought gold, each with a lighted candle. The tribal chieftains were seated at the back of the tent in a semicircle, resting upon richly embroidered silk cushions. Servants came and went, with silver trays laden with spices and tea. Other servants maintained the fires and the hookahs. The atmosphere was suffused with the sweet scent of smoke. There were 8 chieftains, but the boy could immediately see which one of them was the most important. An Arab dressed in white and gold, seated at the center of the semicircle. At his side was the young Arab that the boy had spoken with earlier. "Who is this stranger who speaks of omens?" asked one of the chieftains, eyeing the boy. "It is I," the boy answered, and he told what he had seen. "Why would the desert reveal such things to a stranger, when it knows that we have been here for generations?" said another chieftain. "Because my eyes are not yet accustomed to the desert," the boy said. "I can see things that eyes habituated to the desert might not see. And also because I know about the soul of the world," he thought to himself. "The oasis is neutral ground. No one attacks an oasis," said a third chieftain. "I can only tell you what I saw. If you don't want to believe in me, then you don't have to do anything about it." The men fell into an animated discussion. They spoke in an Arabic dialect that the boy didn't understand, but when he made to leave, the guard told him to stay. The boy became fearful. The omens told him that something was wrong. He regretted having spoken to the camel driver about what he had seen in the desert. Suddenly, the elder at the center smiled almost imperceptibly, and the boy felt better. The man hadn't participated in the discussion, and in fact, hadn't said a word up to that point. But the boy was already used to the language of the world, and he could feel the vibrations of peace throughout the tent. His intuition was that he had been right in coming. The discussion ended. The chieftains were silent for a few moments as they listened to what the old man was saying. Then he turned to the boy. This time, his expression was cold and distant. 2,000 years ago, in a distant land, a man who believed in dreams was thrown into a dungeon, and then sold as a slave, the old man said, now in a dialect that the boy understood. Our merchants bought that man and brought him to Egypt. All of us know that whoever believes in dreams also knows how to interpret them. The elder continued. When the pharaoh dreamed of cows that were thin and cows that were fat, this man I'm speaking of rescued Egypt from famine. His name was Joseph. He, too, was a stranger in a strange land, like you, and he was probably about your age. He paused, and his eyes were still unfriendly. We always observe the tradition. The tradition saved Egypt from famine in those days, and made the Egyptians the wealthiest of peoples. The tradition teaches men how to cross the desert, and how their children should marry. The tradition says that an oasis is neutral territory, because both sides have oases, so both are vulnerable. No one said a word, but the man continued. But the tradition says that we should also believe in the messages of the desert. Everything we know was taught to us by the desert. The old man gave a signal, and everyone stood. The meeting was over. The hookahs were extinguished, and the guards stood at attention. The boy made ready to leave, but the old man spoke again. Tomorrow, we are going to break the agreement that says no one at the oasis may carry arms. Throughout the entire day, we will be on lookout for our enemies. When the sun sets, the men will once again surrender their arms to me. For every dead man among our enemies, you will receive a piece of gold. But arms cannot be drawn unless they go into battle. Arms are as capricious as the desert, and if they are not used, the next time they might not function. If at least one of them hasn't been used by the end of the day tomorrow, one will be used on you. When the boy left the tent, the oasis was illuminated only by the light of the full moon. He was 20 minutes from his tent and began to make his way there. He was alarmed by what had happened. He had succeeded in reaching through to the soul of the world, and now the price for doing so might be his life. It was a frightening bet, but he had been making risky bets ever since the day he had sold his sheep to pursue his personal legend. And as the camel driver had said, to die tomorrow was no worse than dying on any other day. Every day was there to be lived or to mark one's departure from this world. Everything depended on one word, Maktub. Walking along in the silence, he had no regret. If he died tomorrow, it would be because God was not willing to change the future. He would at least have died after crossing the strait, and after having worked in the crystal shop, and after having known the silence of the desert and Fatima's eyes. He had lived every one of his days intensely, since he had left home so long ago. If he died tomorrow, he would have already seen more than other shepherds, and he was proud of that. Suddenly he heard a thundering sound, and he was thrown to the ground by a wind such as he had never known. The area was swirling in dust so intense that it hid the moon from view. Before him was an enormous white horse, rearing over him with a frightening scream. When the blinding dust had settled a bit, the boy trembled at what he saw. Astride the animal was a horseman dressed in completely black, with a falcon perched on his left shoulder. He wore a turban, and his entire face, except for his eyes, was covered with a black kerchief. He appeared to be a messenger from the desert, but his presence was much more powerful than that of a mere messenger. The horseman drew an enormous curved sword from a scabbard, mounted on his saddle. The steel of its blade glittered in the light of the moon. "Who dares to read the meaning of the flight of the hawks?" he demanded, so loudly that his words seemed to echo through the 50,000 palm trees of Al-Fayoum. "It is I who dared to do so," said the boy. He was reminded of the image of Santiago Matamoros, mounted on his white horse, with the same infidels beneath his hooves. This man looked exactly the same, except now the roles were reversed. "It is I who dared to do so," he repeated, and he lowered his head to receive a blow from the sword. "Many lives will be saved because I was able to see through the soul of the world." The sword didn't fall. Instead, the stranger lowered it slowly until the point touched the boy's forehead. It drew a droplet of blood. The horseman was completely immobile, as was the boy. It didn't even occur to the boy to flee. In his heart, he felt a strange sense of joy. He was about to die in the pursuit of his personal legend, and for Fatima. The omens had been true, after all. Here he was, face to face with his enemy. But there was no need to be concerned about dying. The soul of the world awaited him, and he would soon be part of it. And tomorrow, his enemy would also be a part of that soul. The stranger continued to hold the sword at the boy's forehead. "Why did you read The Flight of the Birds?"